On a dam wall in northern Italy, engineers watched adult ibex walk across a slope so steep that a rock climber would need ropes, chalk, and a helmet just to survive 5 minutes there. The animals did not slip once. They did not pause. They moved across 70 degrees of bare concrete as if it were flat pasture, and nobody watching could fully explain how their bodies were doing it. This is not one strange video from one strange place. The same impossible walk has been filmed on cliffs in the Himalayas, on stone ruins in Ethiopia, on canyon walls in North America, and on artificial dams poured decades after these animals' ancestors had already mastered vertical rock. Something in their hooves, their skeletons, and their instincts lets them treat gravity as optional, and the reason they keep doing it again and again in places with no food and no water is stranger than the climbing itself. Join us and let's discover why mountain-dwelling ungulates defy the laws of physics. Let's go.
Topic number 13. Klipspringer. A 4-inch ledge is enough. That is all a klipspringer needs to stand, turn, and stare down a predator 20 feet below on the plains of eastern and southern Africa. Unlike almost every other hoofed animal on the continent, this antelope, barely the size of a large dog, walks on the very tips of rounded, rubbery hooves, balancing its entire body weight on a surface smaller than a coin. Its hooves work almost like the toe shoes of a ballet dancer, cushioning shock and gripping rock at angles that should send it tumbling. Klipspringers mate for life and defend tiny rocky outcrops as permanent territory, refusing to abandon a single boulder even when leopards patrol the base of it. Biologists who studied their gait found something even stranger. The animal barely uses its heel at all, distributing pressure through a narrow vertical column of bone built for one purpose only: holding position on stone. Herders across the region have watched klipspringers vanish upward into cliff faces within seconds, leaving hunting dogs stranded at the bottom, howling at rock they cannot climb. Pairs stay bonded for years, with one partner almost always standing guard while the other feeds, returning to the same outcrop season after season. That same fidelity to a single rock is nothing, though, compared to what one African cliff dweller does with its feet. It keeps them permanently wet, on purpose, to grip stones smooth enough to defeat almost anything else that tries it.
Topic number 12. Rock hyrax. The rock hyrax closest living relatives are elephants and manatees, a fact confirmed by genetic studies that stunned taxonomists when it first surfaced. This stocky, cat-sized mammal, scattered across the cliffs of Africa and the Middle East, keeps the soles of its feet permanently damp through specialized glands, turning dry skin into something closer to a tire compound engineered for wet traction on bare stone. Muscles around each footpad flex the sole into a shallow suction cup on demand, letting hyraxes scale surfaces so smooth that geckos are the only other animals reliably compared to them. Colonies can number in the dozens, all packed onto a single sunlit rock face, sentries posted on the highest points to scream warnings the instant an eagle shadow crosses the slope. Fossil evidence traces hyraxes back tens of millions of years, long before most modern climbing specialists existed, meaning this damp-footed grip was solving the vertical survival problem before elephants had even fully evolved trunks. Despite their small size, hyraxes huddle in tight piles at dawn to warm up before the sun heats the rock directly, letting them start climbing earlier in the day than most neighbors on the same cliff. Male hyraxes defend territory with a long, complex call that can carry across an entire rock face, a sound so distinctive that researchers can identify individual callers purely by the pattern of notes. Sticky skin only goes so far on terrain that shifts constantly underfoot, though, and one cliff specialist in South America survives the exact same threat using raw, explosive jumping power instead.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Topic number 11. Southern Viscacha. A single missed landing ends a Viscacha's life, and this rabbit-sized rodent still spends nearly every day of it jumping between narrow rock shelves thousands of feet up in the Andes.
Colonies burrow into crevices along rocky outcrops from Peru down through Argentina, sometimes at altitudes above 13,000 feet, where thin air alone leaves most mammals gasping before they even attempt a climb. Viscaches move in explosive, unpredictable bursts, launching themselves between ledges with a technique that confuses aerial predators trying to track a consistent trajectory. Their hind legs, disproportionately powerful compared to their small frame, generate the leverage needed to clear gaps that would be fatal misses for almost any other rodent their size. Local communities in parts of the Andes have hunted viscaches for centuries, yet the population on the steepest, most treacherous cliff faces has remained remarkably stable, because those specific walls are simply too dangerous for consistent human pursuit. Researchers monitoring the colonies noted something unsettling. Viscaches appeared to memorize entire escape routes across a cliff face as juveniles, and one wrong turn during a real chase, even for an experienced adult, still ends in a fall with no recovery. Andean condors circle the same colonies for years, waiting specifically for the rare moment a young or injured animal misjudges a jump. And thousands of miles north, an entirely different family of animals turned that same vertical stone into a permanent highway.
Topic number 10. Chamois. Some of the trails etched into the cliffs of the European Alps are older than most human roads still in use today. Chamois, the slender, dark-horned goat antelope found across mountain ranges from France to Romania, followed the exact same paths across rock faces for generation after generation, wearing narrow grooves into stone through nothing but repeated hoofprints over hundreds of years. A chamois kid learns these routes almost immediately after birth, following its mother's exact footing across ledges barely wider than a human hand, memorizing terrain that will keep it alive for the rest of its life. In winter, when snow buries most mountain vegetation, chamois retreat to the steepest south-facing rock, where sun exposure clears patches of usable ground long before gentler slopes thaw. Wolves and lynx that once hunted chamois freely across open alpine meadows lose almost all advantage the moment the chase reaches vertical stone. And hunters over the centuries reported the same pattern again and again. A chamois cornered on a cliff face is more dangerous to approach than one caught in open terrain. Modern wildlife cameras placed along these ancestral routes have confirmed something remarkable, showing unrelated herds using the exact same footholds within the same week, as if the rock itself had quietly been worn into a permanent map. One desert-dwelling relative of the domestic goat pushes that same instinct even further, resting directly above drops it could never survive falling from.
Topic number 9. Nubian ibex. These desert goats can go days without drinking water, and they spend that time resting directly above sheer 100-foot drops on the cliffs of Ein Gedi, an oasis carved into rock above the Dead Sea. Tourists routinely photograph Nubian ibex standing on ledges above those drops, close enough to see individual hairs on their coats, with no fence and no barrier between the animal and the edge. Male Nubian ibex grow long, backward-curving horns that can weigh a significant portion of their skull, yet they still navigate crumbling limestone edges with total precision, using horn weight as a counterbalance rather than a liability. Archaeological carvings from thousands of years ago, found across the Middle East, already depict these exact animals standing on cliffs, meaning humans have been documenting this behavior since long before written history existed. Rangers at Ein Gedi have watched ibex descend near vertical cliffs specifically to drink at the base of waterfalls, then climb straight back up within minutes, treating a 100-foot rock face the way most animals treat a short walk to a stream. Female Nubian ibex form loose nursery groups on isolated ledges during birthing season, choosing spots so exposed that predators struggling with the terrain rarely attempt an approach at all. Newborn kids can follow the herd across near vertical rock within a day, guided almost entirely by scent and by matching the exact placement of their mother's hooves step for step. One cliff specialist in North America turns that same fearlessness into an active weapon against one of the continent's most dangerous hunters.
Topic number 8.
Bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep turn a 2,000-foot vertical wall of red sandstone into an escape hatch from mountain lions, and they do it inside Zion National Park, Utah, where canyon walls rise almost straight up from the canyon floor. When a chase begins on open ground, a mountain lion can match or exceed a bighorn's speed within seconds. But the moment the terrain tilts past a certain angle, the entire equation flips. Bighorns scale rock at a near 90-degree pitch, using hooves split into two independently moving halves, each half gripping a separate microscopic irregularity in the stone at the same time. Rangers have documented incidents where a mountain lion pursued a bighorn to the literal edge of a cliff, only to stop dead as the sheep continued upward onto terrain the cat's own claws could never grip. Bighorn rams also use this same vertical terrain for a very different purpose, charging each other at speeds near 30 miles per hour on narrow ledges during mating season, a collision force strong enough to echo across entire canyons. Bighorn lambs are up and following their mothers across narrow sandstone ledges within a day of birth, with almost no margin for error on Zion's steepest walls. Wildlife biologists tracking the park's population found that sheep spend measurably more time on cliff faces during periods of high predator activity, treating the wall itself as a form of real-time protection rather than a last resort. Not every cliff specialist stops at bare rock either. One wild goat species has taken vertical living high enough into the treetops that its horns now snag branches 30 feet off the ground.
Markhor. A markhor stands 30 feet up a leaning pine branch, horns spiraling upward like drill bits, reaching leaves nothing else in the region can touch. Native to the rugged borderlands of Pakistan and Afghanistan, markhor are the largest wild goat species alive, and males can carry horns exceeding 5 feet in length, while still balancing on rock ledges narrower than a door frame. But the vertical world these animals move through extends far beyond bare stone, and that detail changes the entire scale of the story being told here. If mineral-rich rock, ancient stone ruins, and modern concrete dams can all substitute for a natural cliff face in the eyes of a hungry ungulate, then this behavior is not confined to a handful of famous mountain ranges. It is happening on infrastructure humans built within living memory, on ruins abandoned centuries ago, and on isolated peaks almost no camera has ever reached. Markhor populations, once hunted to critically low numbers across their range, have slowly rebounded through targeted conservation in both countries, and modern camera traps continue turning up climbing behavior nobody had documented before. Local communities in parts of Pakistan now earn income through regulated trophy hunting permits that fund markhor conservation directly, a system that has coincided with a measurable rise in the wild population. Somewhere above the tree line in the Himalayas, a much smaller relative faces this exact same vertical world, except its closest neighbor on that cliff face is the animal actively trying to kill it.
Topic number 6. Barrel. A snow leopard closest to within a few body lengths of a barrel, close enough to see breath fog in the freezing Himalayan air, before the herd simply steps onto a ledge the cat's paws cannot safely reach. Both species evolved on the identical terrain, cliffs so steep that a single miscalculated step ends the hunt permanently, for either the hunter or the hunted. Barrel graze in tight groups on grassy slopes wedged between cliff bands, specifically so they can retreat vertically in seconds if a leopard is spotted, treating open grazing ground as temporary and rock as the only true safety. Researchers studying both species noted that snow leopards have evolved enormous paws and exceptional balance specifically to close the terrain gap, yet barrel still escape the majority of pursuits once the chase reaches a genuine cliff face. In some documented encounters, the distance separating predator and prey at the final moment measured under 10 feet, decided entirely by which animal's hooves or paws held their grip a fraction of a second longer. Barrel herds post lookouts on the highest available point of a slope, animals that stop grazing entirely and scan constantly for movement, a rotating duty that every adult in the group takes on in turn. Surviving that kind of pursuit is only half the battle for a mountain ungulate, though. One close relative of these animals nearly lost the fight against extinction itself, with a population that once dropped low enough to count on 2 hands and both feet.
Topic number 5. Walia ibex.
Fewer than 200 Walia ibex remained on Earth at the population's lowest recorded point, all of them confined to the Simien Mountains of Ethiopia, a landscape of cliffs so dramatic that early European explorers initially refused to believe local accounts of goats living there. Walia ibex are found nowhere else on the planet, and their entire historical range shrank to a narrow strip of escarpment as farming and hunting pressure closed in from every direction over the 20th century. Male Walia ibex carry massive curved horns and dark, almost black coats that stand out sharply against the pale volcanic rock of the Simien Escarpment, making them one of the most visually striking cliff specialists in Africa. Conservation programs launched in the following decades slowly rebuilt the population into the hundreds, but the species remains critically endangered, with its entire future still tied to a single mountain range and the cliffs running through it. Park rangers patrolling the Simien Mountains have reported Walia ibex standing directly above sheer drops exceeding 1,000 feet, seemingly undisturbed by tourists, aircraft noise, or nearby baboon troops moving across the same slopes. What happened to the Walia ibex, a population collapse followed by a fragile recovery, is not the most extreme survival story in this galley of animals. One close relative did not just shrink to a handful of individuals, it went extinct completely. And for a few strange minutes years later, it existed again.
Topic number 4. Pyrenean Ibex. On January 6, 2000, the last Pyrenean ibex on Earth, a female named Celia, was found dead under a fallen tree in the mountains of northern Spain, and with her, an entire subspecies that had survived on vertical Pyrenean cliffs for thousands of generations disappeared completely. Before she died, researchers had preserved skin cells from Celia, specifically because her population was already down to a single known survivor, a scientific gamble that would not pay off for 3 more years. In 2003, using DNA from those preserved cells implanted into domestic goat eggs, scientists produced a cloned Pyrenean ibex kid, the first time an extinct species had ever been brought back to life, even briefly. The clone lived for only a few minutes after birth, dying from a severe lung defect, but for those few minutes, a species erased entirely from the planet stood on 4 legs again. Pyrenean ibex, like their alpine relatives, spent millions of years perfecting the hoof structure and balance built for near-vertical limestone, a skill set that let them dominate cliffs no predator could follow them onto. None of that anatomy saved them from the combined pressure of poaching, disease, and competition with livestock that wiped out the subspecies within a few generations. Whatever let Pyrenean ibex outlast avalanches and predators on impossible terrain for so long could not outlast humans on flatter ground, and one surviving relative on a different continent is proving that same climbing anatomy can outlast almost anything modern engineering throws at it instead.
Topic number 3. Rocky Mountain Goat. A newborn Rocky Mountain goat stands and follows its mother across a ledge barely wider than a human hand within hours of birth, with 0 training and 0 margin for error, on cliffs inside Glacier National Park steep enough to stop experienced human climbers cold. Each hoof splits into 2 independently mobile pads, a hard outer rim for gripping rock edges and a soft rubbery inner cushion that deforms around uneven stone to maximize contact on every step. Despite the name, genetic studies place the species closer to antelope and chamois than to true goats, though its climbing anatomy converges on nearly the same solution found across this entire list. Researchers tracking Rocky Mountain goats have recorded them leaping more than 5 feet vertically from a standing position, using nothing but a small rock knob as a launch point, a jump that would be reckless even for a trained human athlete on flat ground. As global temperatures rise, biologists have documented these goats shifting activity increasingly into cooler nighttime hours, a behavioral change happening fast enough to be measured within a single generation rather than over centuries. Their inner ear, disproportionately large for their body size, continuously tracks orientation in space, feeding balance corrections to the legs faster than the animal could ever consciously process the terrain in front of it. Engineers watching all of this unfold reached a conclusion that changed an entire field of robotics. Nothing built by humans has come close to matching what these animals do instinctively on vertical rock.
Topic number 2. Animal robot. A four-legged machine built at ETH Zurich, modeled directly on mountain goat hooves, still cannot match what a wild ibex does without conscious thought, even after years of dedicated engineering. Legged robots designed for disaster zones, mountain rescue, and planetary exploration routinely fail on terrain that alpine and Rocky Mountain species navigate every single day, because replicating independently adjustable hoof pads, real-time balance correction, and split-second surface evaluation in mechanical form remains extraordinarily difficult. Engineers studying these animals examined how ungulates continuously redistribute body weight across multiple contact points, adjusting load in real time in a way no current robotic control system fully replicates. Some prototype climbing robots, inspired directly by goat and ibex anatomy, have been tested on dam walls and quarry faces, environments chosen because they mimic terrain these animals already colonize on their own. Field tests have consistently shown these robots stalling on wet or crumbling rock, exactly the kind of surface a wild ibex crosses without hesitation, because no sensor package yet reads a shifting foothold as fast as a hoof can feel it. Despite genuine breakthroughs over the past decade, the most advanced climbing robots on Earth still move at a fraction of the speed and with a fraction of the confidence that a wild goat displays on a cliff face within its first year of life. On one specific structure in the Italian Alps, that gap between animal and machine becomes almost impossible to look away from.
Topic number 1. Singino Dam. Adult ibex are standing partway up a 70-degree wall of bare concrete with no rope, no harness, and no natural handhold anywhere in sight. And the wall belongs to Singino Dam in the Italian Alps. Photographs of the scene have circulated online for years because almost nobody who sees them believes they are real. The ibex are not performing a trick, and they are not lost. They are licking the concrete itself, drawn by salt and mineral deposits that leach out of the dam's surface the way minerals leach out of natural rock. And their bodies cannot tell the difference between a structure poured in the 20th century and a cliff shaped over millions of years. Engineers who inspected the dam confirmed the animals were targeting specific mineral-rich patches, meaning every ibex on that wall had assessed which sections of bare concrete were worth the risk. Footage from the site shows adult ibex balanced at severe angles, using the exact same split hoof mechanics documented across their wild mountain range, on a surface with none of the geological texture their species evolved to read. What makes Singino different from every other cliff, ruin, or rock face on this list is that humans built it decades after these same animals' ancestors had already spent millions of years perfecting the exact skill set needed to stand on it. Nothing about that wall was designed with ibex in mind, and nothing about the ibex was designed with concrete in mind. Yet the two collided into one of the strangest sights modern engineering has ever accidentally produced. For these animals, a vertical wall of any kind was never an obstacle. It was always simply home.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.